think we will get started. Thank you for coming and squeezing into the space. I will just go ahead and get started. So, Gayle Morrison has worked with the Hmong community ever since they first arrived in the U.S. as refugees in 76. Unable to find out anything about their culture back in the days before the internet, she started interviewing her Hmong coworkers about their lives in Laos. Now, 40 years later, she has authored 3 Hmong oral history books. Gayle has traveled to Hmong refugee camps in Thailand and tribal villages in Laos. She has a BA in sociology and an MA in psychology.
Hello and welcome. This is my test on this microphone. Welcome to everybody, and I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of my background, which I think Maria just did, which was that I was working in a community college as a counselor in 1976. It was my first year there when the new arrivals, the Vietnamese refugees started arriving from after the fall of Saigon. So one of the things I was doing was teaching a course called College Orientation for Vietnamese Students. And in that class were 3 Hmong students. And I was convinced that they were really Vietnamese because I had never heard of Hmong or had any idea that Laos was part of the Vietnam War. But I really, really liked those students. And so in 1978, a couple years later, when the Hmong leader, General Vang Pao, set up a social service organization to provide services for new arrival Hmong refugees, excuse me, I jumped at the chance to work more closely with the Hmong. So here we are with oral history. How does that fit in? Okay, what is oral history? It's a method of historical documentation that uses recorded interviews with individuals to gather personal accounts of past events, experiences, and perspectives. I think you can read the rest of it. To provide firsthand accounts of events, to reveal multiple perspectives, to capture the emotions as well as the thoughts of a speaker, to create primary source documentation, and to inform future generations. My use of oral history is maybe a little different from most oral historians, but anyway, it is a little bit different because I work cross-culturally. So the Hmong staff that I worked with at Lao Family, the agency that I went to work for in Laos, they had been educated in Laos. A few of them had even been educated in France. But most all of the new arrival Hmong refugees coming in were pre-literate, meaning they could not read or write in any language whatsoever, and certainly not in English. One of my jobs was managing the ESL program at Lao Family, which is where I was working. ESL being English as a second language. In 1984, I was still working there when the board of directors sent me and a Hmong interpreter to, excuse me, I'm a little nervous, to Thailand to do research in the refugee camps. And early one morning, we left the camp and went up to the Mekong River, and I was really surprised to find a group of Hmong who had just come across the river from Laos. I had no idea why that was going on, so I asked my interpreter, the war has been over for 9 years, and why are these people coming across the river? I don't understand. And he said, that's for you to find out. So I felt fully challenged by the time I came back from Thailand and got home again, and I wanted to be able to figure out what he was talking about and what we had seen. one of the problems was I started looking for information about Hmong, and it just didn't exist. There were a couple of articles in National Geographic, but beyond that, there was very, very little information about them. And so I thought, well, now how am I going to learn about these people, their history and their culture, when there's nothing written about them? And that's how my 40-year adventure as a historian, oral historian for the Hmong began. I borrowed a tape recorder from the ESL program, since I ran the ESL program, and started doing, very tentatively, started interviewing my coworkers. Well, as time went by, other coworkers really were interested in what that guy had said. And they wanted to know what that woman had said. But they were too shy to ask each other those questions. So they said, Gayle, you write a book, okay? It's like, oh, that was never anything that I had intended to do or planned to do or anything else. But they were pretty insistent about that was how they were going to find out the other people's stories. But their one requirement was that they needed to know exactly who was saying what. They did not want it to be anonymous information. They needed to know exactly that Yang Chi said this. So, with that mandate, we will proceed, and I will be reading a few of the excerpts from my different Hmong history books, oral history books, to highlight some of what I'm talking about. This is a map of Southeast Asia. I see enough gray hair in here that I know we've got some vets at least in the room. In 1961, Hmong and American history started to intertwine together. Nobody knew the future of it at that point, but it started to blend, mostly because of the smoke jumpers. Missoula Smokejumpers and Smokejumpers out of McCall, Idaho, were very quietly hired by the CIA to go work in Southeast Asia. At the time, they didn't know where they were going. They just knew that they were off on their own adventure to do something. Jerry Daniels was one of those smoke jumpers that was hired out of Missoula and sent to Thailand, as was Mike Ulrich, who was not only a Missoula smoke jumper, but also one of Jerry's really good friends. And they were both hired as cargo kickers for Air America, meaning that they were pushing supplies out of airplanes to go down to the ground to support Vong Pau's Hmong troops that were on the ground in Laos. Oh, not quite yet. This is Mike Ulrich. This is part of what he had to say about that. I got recruited out of the Missoula Smokejumper base. To my surprise, there were 6 of us jumpers at Takli Air Base in Thailand. We loaded the airplane and kicked cargo out over Laos. I was baptized right away, 3rd or 4th flight. We were in a C-46, and Jerry was giving me an orientation, showing me where we were on the map. He'd say, "This area is okay, but watch out over here. Here are the bad guys." We made the drop and are flying away in the empty airplane when kerwhump, there's a big hole in the wing the size of a saucer. Only 3 feet from my butt. That's when it hit me that there were enemies down there who wanted to kill me. As a pre-literate people, Hmong and Laos had always relied heavily on, or solely actually, on their verbal communication, and they really did develop wonderful, outstanding, excellent memories. In the refugee camps in Thailand, they developed a new mnemonic device to preserve their history, and that's the art of embroidered story cloths. Often the story cloth designs actually show accurate depictions of different historical events and places. And this one, this is my pointer stick. It actually belonged to Jerry Daniels. This one up here, this is the Longchang Air Base in northern Thailand. And Longchang was not only the headquarters for General Vang Pao and Military Region 2, it was also the headquarters for the CIA's operations in northern Laos. And this is an aerial view of the Longchang runway. You can see how mountainous northern Laos is. And that's the runway itself. Eventually, it became 4,000 feet long. And at its peak, the number of flights going in and out of Longchang was more than Chicago's O'Hare International. It was an extraordinarily busy place. And the CIA operations, which would be just to the left of, well, I have a pointer stick, which would be over here, was called Sky. Where am I? Oh, okay. This is what Nia Vang was, a radio operator who worked for Jerry Daniels. And this is what he had to say. You ask what is Sky? Well, Jerry Daniels was Sky. He was raised in Montana, big Sky country. Jerry was the advisor for the secret operation based in Longchang, Laos. So he named the American headquarters the Sky Compound. Jerry never called himself CIA, which is what he was, but people understood it that way. In truth, Sky headquarters was an American embassy outpost during the Vietnam War. Sky supported Military Region 2 and the Hmong soldiers all during the war years. This photo is no doubt familiar to probably everybody in this room. When South Vietnam was lost on April 30th, 1975, the writing was on the wall for Laos as well. In May 75, 2 weeks after the fall of Saigon, as communist forces took over Laos, Jerry Daniels was the only American left in Longchang. Jerry and General Vang Pao developed a plan to fly 2,500 Hmong officers, soldiers, and their families from Longchang to neighboring Thailand. And this again is Nia Vang, Jerry's radio operator, speaking. Once the American planes started to fly, we are very busy working about 16 hours per day. Jerry and I are out on the airstrip every day talking to the American pilots about where they're going to land, if it's safe to land, or if they should take off. In one hand, I hold the radio for the airplanes. In the other hand, I have a mobile radio that we use to contact VP's house. VP is Vang Pao. We are driving around, staying in the Sky Jeep all the time. At the airstrip, the people are all jammed up. Jerry and I keep moving. The American evacuation by the CIA flew planes for 3 days. And this is one of the women who was in this mass of people. This is what she had to say. The last day in Longchang, now we don't carry anything. We go early to the airport. There are a lot of people out there, people so close together, even if you pour a bowl of water over people's heads, it won't drip down to the ground. About 6 a.m., the big plane comes in. There is a lady in line behind me. She says, "It's not your turn. Wait. I wear a big overcoat, and she holds onto my sleeve. She wants to keep me there. I am a smart lady. I think about it and I say, forget it. I pull off my overcoat and leave my sleeve in her hand. I let it go and I run to the plane. So many people bumping into me, push, push, push. We just take our lives and forget everything else. Oh, it's too hard. After the evacuation ended, thousands and thousands of people were left waiting on the runway at Longcheng. For the next 15 years, most of these American allies were trapped inside Laos. They hid in the jungles where they were attacked by communist soldiers, rockets, and chemical poisons that were dropped from the airplanes. About half the population died, not only from the attacks, but from starvation, disease, and drowning. These are the post-war stories that are documented in my third and final book, which is Deep Tears. That's that one. Chung Li was one of the people trying to survive in the jungle, so this is from him. On the radio, we hear that in the U.S., the people vote for President Ford. For President Ford, the U.S. government only thinks about a plan for the United States. They don't have a plan to help other countries. Ford is president until 77. After Ford, Jimmy Carter is the same, 77 to 81. After Jimmy Carter, Reagan. Still, there is no U.S. foreign policy to help us. How many years for each president? I listened through 3 presidents. I listened until Reagan. By May 1983, we are so desperate. Now I don't care about anybody else. I only think about safety for my family and myself. We are so desperate, I will take the risk to get my family to Thailand. In order to get from those mountains that we saw earlier around Longcheng, in order to get from the mountains in Laos down to the lowlands of Thailand, families not only had to sneak through the jungle, which took about 30 days, then they had to cross the Mekong River, which is a really terrifying challenge for them since very, very few Hmong know how to swim. Way up in the mountains, there are no large bodies of water where you learn how to swim. There's just little streams. So not only that, but the Mekong River is a sealed border with armed patrol boats going along. So many, many lives were lost in the river at the very, very end trying to get to Thailand. And this is Tang Li, who lives down in North Carolina now. He was a lucky teenager who actually knew how to swim. He was one of the lucky ones. That night, 5 of us tie ourselves together so we won't get separated, and we all jump into the river at the same time. It's dark. We swim and swim. I am still swimming when my hand touches sand. Ha! My hand hits the ground, and when I stand up, it's only to my knees. I made it to Thailand. It's okay. For me, 4 years in the jungle is over. For those who do make it to Thailand, immigration documentation starts. In Thailand, the refugee eligibility is very heavily vetted through rigorous political and medical screenings that go on. And from 1975 to 1982, Jerry Daniels was on loan from the CIA to the U.S. State Department as the political screener for the Hmong refugees who eventually came to the U.S. And this time I have kind of a long one, but I think it'll entertain you. So if you'll indulge me, this is Thomas Tong Vang, who now lives in Sacramento. He's a former Hmong interpreter for Jerry in Thailand. People wanted to go to the U.S. badly. Many people tried to cheat. Some lied to Jerry that they were soldiers. Some of the people who smoked opium lied to him and told him they were clean. Some had more than one wife, and they said they don't have more than one wife. But Jerry finds out the truth. Jerry tells us to tell them there is a computer that will catch any information that they don't give to him. Jerry said to the people, if you lie to me and you smoke opium, the computer will catch it. If you have more than one wife and you tell me you don't have more than one wife, the computer will catch it. So tell me exactly right now so I can try to do good for you. All of us interpreters, we asked, what's a computer? Nobody knows what that is. Jerry just said, it's a computer. All of this made people shake, including some of us. Some of those cheater people came to interview shaking. They asked, what's a computer? We said, oh, we don't know what's a computer. We never heard of that. But don't lie, because the computer will catch it. Many times we asked Jerry, what's a computer? Jerry didn't want to tell us anything. Many times he just said, it's a computer, it's from the air. You never see it, but it sees you. It knows if you lie when you talk to me. The computer will catch that information and tell people in the States that you lied, and you will be punished. We thought the computer was a ghost, something in the air. And when you fly in the airplane, the computer will scan you. And when you go through the scan, it will tell people in the States, these people lied. When Jerry talked about the computer, people realized they'd better be honest, including us. We interpreters had to translate exactly what the people told us to tell Jerry and the INS. We said, be honest, because something will catch any lie. I don't know exactly how, but somehow it will show when you go to America. Maybe the ghost will see it and tell them. So that worked for everyone. When I came to the U.S., the first time I saw a real computer, I said, oh, that's a computer? I am not afraid of a computer anymore. And now I work with one every day. Those who passed all the screening tests became eligible to come to the U.S. as political refugees. And this is another young man, Chow Yang, who now lives in Alaska, of all places. Jerry and I got into the same plane at the Bangkok airport. There were both regular passengers and refugees on that plane. We flew all day and got to Hong Kong. Then the sun set. Jerry said, we stay here for about 30 minutes, then we will continue on to Tokyo. I asked, is Tokyo in the USA? He said, no, not that fast, son. That's in Japan. When we stop in Japan, it's 3 a.m. The next time we see the sun, I have another question for Jerry. How far are we flying? Jerry said, you can see that sun for 3 hours, then the sun is going to go down. I said, how can it go down so fast, Jerry? He said, oh, I don't know. I have the same question. Every time I come this way, it's like that. I don't know why. 3 hours later, the sun goes down again. In my life, I never saw the sun stay up so little. The immediacy and turmoil of the first 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks in Longchang, is the story of Sky is Falling. This is the new version of it, but that is what Yi Ling is holding there. And for so many of the pre-literate Hmong, they are just so proud to have their history documented for the first time. I was told by a lot of the people that I've never told my story to anyone because no one has ever asked me. So, what do you need to be a good oral historian? Well, a good listener for sure, patience and perseverance, enjoying detective work and puzzles, because people's memories are not linear. They are not chronological. They'll remember one thing 3 weeks later. They'll remember, something before that, something after that. You have to be able to piece all of that together. And to have a real interest in the subject, whatever the subject is, you need to be really interested in that and following up on that. And the last point is to understand that the making of history is really messy because memories do jump around and maybe they only remember things, later. It's messy. When you read a history book, you just see the end result, basically. You don't get to see how messy it is getting there. And so I love oral history because of the way the people report, this is what I was thinking right there on the tarmac at Longchang. This is what was going through my head. Or this was my little conversation with Jerry on the airplane. So this is one of the women that I interviewed, Sia Tao. She said, "The only reason I remember this much is because you asked me so many questions. Then I have to think about it. But if somebody else asked me, I would have no idea and would not remember it at all." There are, of course, challenges for cross-cultural oral history. The first one is money and time. I tell everybody, keep your day job because you are never going to get wealthy. You are never even going to break even. That's okay. It's a passion, but know that going into it. For decades, I used all my vacation time from work. I would take my sleeping bag and tape recorder and head off to wherever I was going to find Hmong people to interview. Regarding time, doing the interviews, which is time-consuming in and of itself, setting up appointments and showing up and doing interviews. You don't do just one interview. You do many interviews. And so that's the beginning of it. Then you get home and you realize you have to transcribe all of these interview tapes. And it's good that I've always been a really good typist because I ended up with thousands and thousands of transcribed pages from the interviews. And then you have to sort out how to put it all together. It is time sensitive. There is an urgency to oral history because not only do memories fade over time, but at least 60% of the people I interviewed have already passed away by now. Speakers' schedules. One example of that is I had an interview time set up with a man down in North Carolina. I had my little vacation time from work. I flew to North Carolina. I made it to his house out in the boondocks. And I said, I'm here to interview Vang Bi. Is he home? No, he went fishing. Fishing. I have an appointment with him. Appointments being big to, us native-born Americans. I have an appointment with him. I was starting to get a little hot under the collar about that point. And she said, well, he's gone fishing. Well, when is he coming back? What time this afternoon? Oh, no, not this afternoon. He's gone until next week. I said, what do you mean gone until next week? I have an appointment with him. She said, no problem. No problem. You come back next time. So it was a year later. I returned to North Carolina, had a wonderful interview with him, but I have never forgotten, you have to be able to respect the speaker's own personal schedules, which may or may not have anything to do with what you think is going to happen. Use of interpreters. Overall, maybe 40% of the Hmong speakers I interviewed chose to go through interpreters. The other 60%, to my surprise, chose to speak in English. Not perfect English, but certainly understandable English. In order to use interpreters, I needed to know an awful lot about Hmong culture and history, because there's all kinds of pitfalls that are possible. There's a very dense social web within the Hmong community. Everybody knows everybody. And so there are clan rivalries. There are political rivalries. Do they have a competent relative who might translate for them or not? You have to figure all this stuff out in order to make sure that you've got a competent translator in the end. And I learned the hard way to not use any children younger than college age as interpreters. They did not have the language facility, and especially for the vocabulary that was necessary to talk about jungle food. For example, in Laos, I'd hear them say, "Achine, what's that?" They're asking their dad, "What's that?" They don't know what that plant is or what that. They didn't know any of the military terms either. So there was figuring things out as you go. Gatekeepers. True for both some of the Hmong and most of the CIA guys. And I would find out afterwards that they had checked up on me just like I had checked up on them. They had talked to each other, behind closed doors to find out, is it okay to talk to her or not? And so keeping a clean reputation within the community was extremely important. Otherwise, the game is over. Allowing for the speaker's pace and style. Usually always when I do interviews with somebody, the first interview does what I call lay down the bones. It's 2 to 3 hours long usually, and it's getting a general sense of how their story might proceed so that I can go back, think about it, think about what questions I want to ask, think about how their story fits with other people's stories. And so the subsequent interviews are the ones where I start packing meat onto the bones. And the final edition starts to form. Oh, yeah. Sometimes it is hard to keep the person you want to interview, keep them on track. For example, I want to talk to somebody about being in Longcheng in May of 1975 because I've heard from their relatives that this guy has a good story from May of 1975. Okay, hello, we're meeting. I'd like to hear about that. Okay, I will tell you. I was born on a mountaintop in 1938. And he starts rolling forward from there. After about an hour of this, I don't want to be rude, but at the same time, it's a long way to 1975. I say, do you think we could just talk about 1970? Sure. Okay, good, because I've heard you have a really good story. Let's do that. Okay. I was born on a mountaintop in 1938, and on it goes. And at that point, you just give up and you let the tape roll and you know you're there for however long it takes to get to 1975, because that is the way he tells his story. There is no shortcut. There is no way around it. That's the way it's going to proceed. And the final, no, not the final point, second to the final point, the lack of written documents. As I said, pre-literate people, there's nothing. Photos, corroboration, no, nothing at all. So only 3 of the more than 100 Hmong that I interviewed, 3 of them had tiny little notebooks that they'd actually kept information in. I was enormously grateful to them, but it was only 3, out of more than 100. But at least I had a few touch points that I could confirm. So how do you confirm without documents? Well, you cross-reference stories and verify. Okay, that happened in the spring. You learn when different crops are being collected. Okay, that was during the first corn. The crops were being collected during the first corn of the season. Okay, well, let's see what we can do with that. And you work with all of them, cross-referencing to verify. It's not perfect, but it's not bad, actually. And finding people, how do you find people to interview? Well, as I said, I started with my co-workers and then went on to friends of theirs, families of theirs, acquaintances of theirs. Eventually, I live in Southern California. Eventually, I went to the Central Valley. I mean, look at that guy's face. Isn't he just somebody you want to talk to? He was a wonderful guy at the senior center in Fresno. And this is when I moved on to North Carolina, out to the poultry farms that are out in the way out back, actually. And eventually got to Minnesota. And eventually, my favorite, doing interviews at the Copper Queen up in Helmville. Well, you could tell that this guy, he was a former smoke jumper. He was a good friend of Jerry Daniels. And he started spinning yarns, and all you could do was sit there and listen and laugh because he was a great storyteller. So that was this picture isn't my first trip to Missoula, but my first trip to Missoula was in 2002. It was supposed to wrap up. I thought I was done with the Jerry Daniels story because I had talked to the Hmong. Jerry was, when he died, he had a traditional 3-day Hmong funeral ceremony here in Missoula. And so the Hmong funeral ceremony is very, very interesting to me. It's a beautiful ceremony. But I was told by some of the people that I should come up to Missoula and, check it out, because this is where he was from. So I did that. Until then, I only focused on the Hmong funeral ceremony, but I got up here. I met his brothers. I met his friends that went hunting with him, fishing with him, drinking with him, that had known him all his life, and the whole story exploded. Absolutely exploded. It took me another 10 years of serious interviewing to finally bring a wrap to the Jerry Daniels story. And eventually, I did end up doing a few interviews in bars in Bangkok, Thailand. These are for the old Lao hands that had been there all through the war years and just chose to stay behind in Thailand. For Hmong, I'm not saying for everybody, but this is just for Hmong. These extended 3-day funeral ceremonies are a great place to find people. People you know, people you don't know. They're well attended, oftentimes 100, 200, 500. There was something like 40,000 Hmong who came to General Vang Pao's funeral in Fresno. It's just unbelievable, the size of the funerals. But there's a lot of time. I mean, it's 24 hours a day for 3 days. So you sit around, you talk to people, you meet new people, you find old friends, and that's one of those cross-cultural things that I don't think most native-born Americans are going to experience without going to a Hmong funeral. So, in the end, what's come of my 40 years of being an oral historian for the Hmong? Lifelong friends. That's it. I don't know if anybody has questions.
I have a question.
Are there only 6 last names in Hmong? No, there's about 10 to 12, depending on how you cut it. Yeah.
So of the people that you talked with, had any of them returned to Laos or Vietnam or anywhere?
A few of them had gone back to Laos to visit relatives that were there. Not for many years. Nobody went back. Nobody wanted to go back at all. And then some started venturing back cautiously. So, yeah. And a few have gone back to live in Laos, which personally I think is foolish and very dangerous, but that's what they did.
In this very rapidly changing political situation we find ourselves in Washington, is there any concern that some that have become birthright citizens, be it children, grandchildren, or perhaps great-grandchildren, is there any concern that somehow they may be deported?
Several have already been deported. They arrived here as infants and never thought about having to, they considered themselves Americans as they grew up, Hmong Americans, but still Americans, did not think about having to, as an infant, having to apply for citizenship or whatever. Unfortunate oversight. But yeah, several of them have already been sent back.
The gentleman who was born in 1938. Can you tell us about May 1975 for him?
Can I tell you about May 19? I believe I did. May 1975 was the big evacuation, the American evacuation from Longcheng to Thailand 2 weeks after Saigon fell. I'm sorry, there have just been too many, I just know off the top of my head. I could have looked it up if you'd asked me a week ago, but no. Oh, she's...
How long did the Hmong live in Thailand before they were, in camps in Thailand before they were able to come to the United States?
It depends on individual circumstances. Some of them who worked pretty much directly for the U.S. government came very quickly. They didn't spend much time in camp. Some of them stayed there for, I'm not kidding you, 15, 20 years until they actually shut the camp down and they had to, fish or cut bait. You either sign up, these are people who had already been vetted as real political refugees. They did not want to come to the U.S. because their relatives were back in Laos, and also they were hoping that the government would change and they could go back to the way it was before the communist takeover. But they had to choose. You either go to the U.S. or we send you back to Laos. So it's a variety of however long people stayed it just depended on their situation and their choices.
Can I ask what you plan to do with all of that individual interview material that you typed up? Do you plan on making that available to other researchers or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm in my 2.5 year of going through every single file again and preparing it to go into an archive. So it will be available, but because there is some information in there that shouldn't be released, I'm having to go through and with a black felt pen, redact. It's not a lot, but it means I have to reread every word of every interview that I've done for 40 years, which is why it'll still take me a couple more years before I will be able to release that information. Yeah. Oh, there's two of you. Hang on.
Can you tell us a bit about the Hmong who came to Missoula and why they came to Missoula?
Why they came to Missoula is because the first crop were handpicked by Jerry Daniels, who said, I'm sending you to Missoula, and my mom's going to take care of you. And she did. Louise Daniels in Hogs, I guess I'm not attached to anything, I can walk around, in Hogs Exit, which is about Jerry and his funeral and the CIA and working in Laos and smoke jumping and everything else. There's a whole chapter in there on Louise Daniels because she was a very important part of Jerry's life. He relied on her heavily. He confided in her when he didn't talk to other people about things that were going on, and she was a great support system. So that was for and some of those original Hmong that he sent here are still here in town.
Your second book was about Jerry Daniels. Now, your last book, can you go over that a little bit about what to expect?
Yeah, the first one was strictly the 2 weeks for the air evacuation from Longcheng to Thailand. The second one is Jerry Daniels, basically his entire life. And the third one is about what happened to the Hmong who were not able to get on those airplanes, who were trapped inside of Laos after the last of the airplanes left.
Was the CIA training any Hmong for espionage or any kind of soldiers or anything like that?
No directly espionage, but soldiers, yeah. I mean, the CIA sent Thai soldiers into Laos to do the training of the Hmong soldiers who were on the grounds in Laos. That's how it was handled because we weren't supposed to be there. It's a neutral country. And there aren't supposed to be American military in there. So it was all handled, not all, but most of it was handled through Thai trainers for the military. Some of the Hmong were sent to the U.S., though. Some of the officers were sent to different places. I don't remember the names of them, but, some of the training bases here for officer training. And then they went back to Laos, back to war again.
Gayle, can you talk a little bit about Vang Pao's experience here in western Montana?
Well, he was pretty devastated by having to leave Laos. He was expecting that, our side was going to win. And so losing Laos and having to leave his country was a huge crushing blow for him. He came to Montana because he'd visited here a couple of times already. He'd come here with Jerry. So he liked the mountains. He knew that there was farming was available. He had never farmed. He'd always been military, but he liked what he saw here. And of course, Jerry's mom was here, and he knew her. She had already been to both Laos, and later she visited Jerry in Thailand in the refugee camps. So when he got to Washington, they tried to keep him there as an advisor, trying to figure out, they being, the government, trying to figure out what to do. Southeast Asia was a mess at that point. But he said, no, I'm going to Montana. And that's what he did. So he had a farm down in the Bitterroot. And he has a very, very large family. And so there was also a house here in town where a lot of the kids went to school here. And so he would go back and forth. And he had good Hmong assistants that were with him that actually knew something about farming. But farming in Laos is entirely different from farming in Montana. I mean, they'd never seen snow before to begin with. And so it was different crops, different seasons. It didn't go very well was the bottom line. So eventually he moved to Southern California, which is where I met him. And that's when he was still going back and forth between the two, trying to decide. I have another story if nobody else has any questions. This is another story from North Carolina. North Carolina was a real experience for me. This was before internet and before GPS and before cell phones. So it was just me in a car trying to follow, crazy instructions about the third house after you've passed 4 trees and you turn right at the big rock and, those kinds of instructions. So this was out, I don't even know where I was in North Carolina, but it was a very rural area. But there was a man I wanted to interview. And he owned a little restaurant, a little Asian restaurant on this country road. I thought, who sold this place to this guy? And why would he buy it as an Asian restaurant on a country road in the middle of nowhere? I don't see a good future for this at all. But that's where I was supposed to meet him. So I showed up. Was he there? No, he was in a meeting. Okay, fine. I will wait. And I will wait, and I will wait. And eventually the women who worked there showed me how to fold up the cutlery inside of the paper napkin. And so I sat there and I worked for several hours. And the regulars, whoever the regulars were, there weren't very many of them, would come in and look at me sitting there folding up the napkins with the cutlery inside. And I kept asking about every 90 minutes, can you call Vang Nang and ask him when he's going to be here? Okay, they'd call. Oh, no, not yet. He's still in his meeting. This went on, as you can see where this is going, until closing time. No Vang Nang, he said, on his last, message to me was, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Well, great. I'm in the middle of I don't know where. I have nowhere to go, and I'm stuck. So I was kind of spooked about the whole thing. I was figuring, well, if I spend the night in my car, I guess I can do that. I don't really have an option. There is no town around here. I mean, I'm out on this country road. So one of the young women who worked there, Lucy Yang, I will never forget Lucy Yang. She'd actually her family had been refugees to France, but most of their relatives were in the U.S., actually in North Carolina, and so they ended up in North Carolina, and she was working at this restaurant. Lucy Yang says, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. Maybe sleep in my car. She said, no. You come home with me. Well, this was a really good option as far as I was concerned. So off we go. She's driving like a bat out of hell on these country roads, and I'm trying to keep up with her. I have no idea where we're going. I know if I get separated, I'm really, really in trouble because I'm not even at the restaurant at that point. We drive for who knows how long, 20 minutes, something like that. It seemed like forever. We get to her house. Because she had spent so many years in France, one of the things she does, it's midnight, right? We've been at the restaurant. I'm exhausted from, folding up the cutlery inside of the paper napkin. But just the whole experience and waiting to talk to Vang Nang and nothing. So I'm really tired. But Lucy says, shall we have a cup of coffee? I said, well, okay, if that's what we're doing. So we had a little cup of coffee, and I said, I'm pretty tired. I really think I need to go to sleep. So I see there's couches here. I will be just fine with my little sleeping bag. She said, oh, no. No. You can sleep in my bed, and I will move to my sister's room. I said, well, no, you don't need to do that. It's okay. I'm fine right here. Oh, no, I insist. You will sleep in my bed, and I will go to my sister's room. Okay, fine. So she leads me into the bedroom. She had not told me that she slept with Grandma. So there I am. It's some insane hour in the morning. I'm barely able to stand on my feet, and I say, no, Lucy, this is not going to work. Your grandma has never seen me, and what is she going to think when she wakes up and she finds some strange white woman in the bed with her? This is not a good plan at all. She said, oh, no, Grandma will be very happy. She'll love it. And I thought, oh this is not a good option. But I didn't have any other option. She insisted that I was going to sleep in that room. So I climb into the bed, hugging, the far corner of it, thinking, oh, I don't know what's going to happen when Grandma wakes up in the morning. So I had very, very little sleep that night because I was too worried about Grandma. And morning comes. I am still wide awake, absolutely exhausted, but wide awake. And I can hear Grandma turning. You can sort of tell if somebody is awake next to you. There's pauses. I think, oh, she's looking over here. She knows I'm not Lucy. I'm not her granddaughter. Who am I? I keep my eyes, shut. I am pretending I am asleep. I'm figuring it, let Grandma figure out or take a look and see who's in bed with her. I don't want any confrontation, but I'm nervous. Then I hear Grandma getting out of bed. I hear her putting on her slippers. My eyes are still glued shut. I hear Grandma shuffling around the bed. I hear Grandma coming up the side of the bed and standing right over me. I'm scared at this point because I'm thinking Grandma could have a big stick, a hammer, or anything. I don't know. She may be trying to defend herself. She may think I'm some weird kind of ghost that's shown up and taken over her granddaughter's body. I'm thinking all of this, and I'm thinking, I know she knows I'm awake. And so I finally get my courage up, and I pop open my eyes. Grandma's face is like 12 inches away from me, and she has a huge smile on her face. And she starts talking to me and Bong, and she is just happy, happy, happy. Lucy was exactly right. Grandma will be just very happy to find you in bed in the morning. Grandma took me by my hand and took me out. She just kept talking the whole time. She showed me her chickens, her pigs, the cow. We went all around. She never stopped talking. She was absolutely delightful. And I will never forget climbing into bed with Grandma.
How old were you when you first started this adventure?
Oh, how old was I? I don't know. I kind of go by years. Somewhere in my 30s? I'm not sure. I would have to do the math, and that's not my strong point. I know I was still in graduate school when I met the first Hmong students. So, yeah. Oh.
Sorry.
How you wound up with Jerry's stick?
Jerry's stick. Isn't it a beauty? This is actually a calendar on here from New Year 1969 in Vientiane, Laos. I have no idea who gave it to Jerry. I became very good friends with Jerry's brother, Kent, who also goes by the name Big Dan, the Animal Man. And there were a lot of things that were laying around that were from Jerry that his brother gave me. And that's how I ended up with Jerry's stick.
Thank you very much for talking.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Yeah. If anybody's interested in buying books, I have a few of each that are here. But yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Remember to come next month for a history of Missoula's fairground with Ramona Holt. Thanks.